I think we're live on Facebook, so and to Zoom. So thank you everybody for coming in. And I see that somebody's already got a question, but we're going to get into introductions, and we'll go ahead and answer the questions here in a minute. So I'm Alex Rivlin, Las Vegas, Nevada, and I've had the pleasure of knowing Matt for probably a little over a year now. We met in person when he was out here for a convention, and then we've had several conversations since. And Matt's unique ability and experience really comes into the financial house. And what's so important about what Matt does is within so many of our careers, they say we're only as good as our next commission. Now, a lot of people that are, on the webinar or going to watch this later, have some great stability in business, but we still fluctuate, right? Everything's relative. Even if you've got 40 in escrow, your expenses are that big. So if you happen to dip to 32 in escrow, it might be a crunch. So in real estate and most commission sales businesses, we have this little bit of a roller coaster ride. Some people have figured out how to really flatten that, but through that, you want to make sure that you're not doing silly things with your money and that you've got that money throughout. So Matt has put together the 5 biggest financial mistakes that agents make and how to fix them. So Matt, go ahead and tell your story, and let's start talking about those mistakes.
Absolutely, Alex. Well, I appreciate not only you having me on, but also Tristan and Nick opening up their platform to allow me to share, educate, inject hope, especially around this topic of money. We were talking before we came on, I don't know many people that raise their hand when it comes to, hey, I love talking about money. It's something that, it's easy to find some shame and guilt around. For a lot of us, we can probably admit that we've made a little bit too much money to be as broke as we are in reality. I'm blessed to be able to talk about this because I've made all 5 financial mistakes. Sometimes they've had some zeros to the end of them. Sometimes they've had a comma. Fortunately, I haven't made a 2-comma mistake yet. However, I think I can promise you if I didn't adjust when Melinda and I adjusted over 6 years ago, we could easily have made over a $1 million mistake. So just a quick backstory of how I got to where we are today is, 8.5 years ago, I woke up, my wife and I were in marriage counseling. I was 100 pounds overweight. I was addicted to sports, drinking, sports gambling, smoking. And we just had a life of turmoil, right? It was conflict. There was always stress. There was always emotion wrapped around our conversations. And a lot of that revolved around money because we both made a lot of money at the time, but we never had any time, number one. And we had always had all of these obligations that were pulling at our money and pulling at us and our stress and our emotions. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it caused a lot of conflict. And so fortunately enough, I found the right people in my life. I found the right programs and made the commitments, right? I think in transformation itself there are 3 steps. Number 1 is awareness. And ultimately, I became aware that I was 300 pounds, alcoholic, addictive sports gambler, smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And I went through that. Step 2 is the decision, right? A decision. And step 3 is intentionality. And over the course of the next year plus, I lost 100 pounds and broke all of those addictions. However, once you do that, all you do is you realize you have a new normal. And my new normal at that point, at the beginning of 2014, was we were $551,000 in debt.
That hurts.
Didn't realize it when I was 300 pounds at the casinos, placing the bets, drinking and gambling and eating, right? However, when I removed all of that in my world, it quickly came to it rose to the surface. And so over the next 40 months, we got on a written budget. We went through some of the steps that I'm going through, some of the mistakes that we made, and ended up paying and eliminating $551,000 in 40 months.
Wow, just over 3 years.
Yeah,
$500,000.
3 years, $500,000. We sold some of it. We negotiated some of it. We cash flowed a majority of it. But at the end of the day, man, May 1st, 2017, we actually went live on the Dave Ramsey show and did our debt-free scream. I had just wrote a last check. It was $6,500 to our 401k loan to make sure that we were 100%. We didn't owe anybody any money. May 1st, 2017.
So speaking of that, can you describe in words what the feeling was and what you thought your future at that point would be like as a result of what you just accomplished?
You know, the feeling back then was undescribable. Like, I had no idea. Like, it was just like we had worked so hard and cut so much, and you know, we cut to the bone. Like, you cut fat, you cut some muscle, but when you cut the bone, like, you walk around with a limp for a while when you cut bone, right? And so we limped around. Like, it was kind of a numbing feeling. Like, we didn't have to pay, you know, $3,500 a month anymore to debt, right? To obligations of the past. Like, we just didn't have to do that anymore. So once that kind of sunk in and realized that, okay, we can now go live on my wife's income. I was starting my real estate business. And so as $5,000 and $3,000 and $12,000 was coming in, like, the amount of money that we could save at that point, rather than paying off the debt, the amount of peace that came with that is not only undescribable, but knowing what we know now and what we've gone through over the last 120 days has been fairly relaxing.
So I think a lot of people, when they think about eliminating that debt, while it's kind of like losing weight, right? You know, you lost 100 plus pounds, right? So it's the sacrifice of what you have to give up in order to benefit on the other side. So how did you overcome that kind of sacrifice of, oh, we're not going to be able to eat out, or we're going to have to hold back on vacation, or we've got to get rid of this 551 first. How do you get to that meager means, or did you even have to? Is it just better organization of all of it?
Yeah, the number one thing that causes real estate agents stress and anxiety is their disorganization in their finances. Most agents don't have an income problem. They have it comes down to a spending problem, whether it's in their business or whether it's in their personal life, right? And that's the same with everyone. It's not just real estate agents, but it's really easy to shine a light on that in an irregular income when we're making big checks, like $20,000 a month, 3 months of zero. Like, that's real. And so, and when you have a lifestyle that's exceeded that at a certain level, you run out of money real quick. And we'll talk about, the path of money and how all of that transpires. But, ultimately, when it does come down to the true brass tacks, is that delay gratification of saying, I want this, I have this, I want to go buy it. Well, does this actually move your needle, or does it make you feel good and look right?
Great. So let's get into action. So first, you're talking about 5 financial mistakes. I'm sure there's probably more of them, but these are probably the most pronounced, the biggest ones, the easiest ones to conquer. But is there an order to them, or are they 5 equally important and have to go together? Or is there, if you don't do one, don't even bother doing the others?
So I would say the number one most important thing is the lack of plan for the future. I think most of us look through the lens of today, and we can see the end of the month, we can see the end of the summer, we may be able to see the end of the year, but we can't see 25 years from now. So we make decisions based on what we feel today rather than what we feel in the future, and we never work towards that. And so the number one thing is we have to identify what is that life we want, not necessarily the business, right? But what's the life we want, and how much money are we going to need? Like, how much money do we have to have when we're ready to just shut it down? Or we're ready to say, I'm just going to stop lead generating, and whatever the business comes in, I'll service. Right? So whatever point that is, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or 40 years from now, depending on where you are, is to go all the way out, turn around and look back so you can gain perspective of the little, of one, the nuggets that you have to drop along the way and the pillar posts that you have to hit in order to get there. This is where, the compound interest comes into play, right? Some people, that number is really big. However, if you apply compound interest, it's not really that big of a number. But the number one thing, Alex, is you have to know where you're going. You have to have that and then align those pillar posts along the way so that when COVID does hit, you can get back on track. Or when recession hits, you can go back on track. Or when, something chaos happens, not in our world, right? 20,000 miles on the other side of the planet, you can adjust. And it keeps on track. So you need a plan.
So effectively, if I get in my car and I start to drive, I've got to know where I'm going. If I'm driving, I'm in Las Vegas right now. If I'm driving to New York and I don't know where I'm going and I hit a detour, I may end up in Texas or Canada.
Yeah,
if I know I'm going to New York, but if I know I'm going to New York and this detour comes up, I'm going to go around that detour, but my navigation is going to get me back on track and I'm still going to end up in New York.
Yep, exactly. And that's, and all of these other, the other four things roll up to that. That's why I put that number one is you have to have a plan, you have to have a path. And when you get off track, you have to have things to kind of, self-correct, either by default or by design, right? And so you have to, that's number one. Definitely the lack of planning is the number one mistake. The way to adjust that, right, how to avoid that, is to sit down with your team leader, with your spouse, with your business partner, with someone that you care about, accountability, mentor, coach, and say, this is what I want. Mm-hmm. How do I get there?
So let's dive a little bit deeper into that in regards to this is what I want. Because one of the questions that I've had, I've been in a lot of different financial type businesses and friends that are starting businesses, other colleagues of mine. Sometimes they feel like they don't know what it is they want. They might put this target up there, but it's really an arbitrary thing, right? It's I want $1 million, or I want $5 million, or I want this scenario. So how do you hone in on that in regards to both being realistic and not saying, Bruno Mars song, right? I want to be a billionaire so freaking bad. How do you hone in on what's realistic? If you exceed reality, awesome, kudos to you. But also that it is a number that makes sense for your true financial freedom based on cost of living adjustments, based on all those types of things. So how do you work with somebody and kind of hone them in on that to get a real number?
Yep. So the very first thing is you have to define what that is for you, right? What is that? All right. Some of the best people that I've worked with have broken it down to as simple as what you want, when you want it, what you want, where you want it, with who you want, etc. Right? Just what do you want? Mm-hmm. And once you define that, how much is that going to cost? If you need $10,000 a month, enter into, there's some different calculators, right? There's some different formulas that you can use to reverse engineer what $10,000 a month looks like 20 years from now. And then simply, okay, if it's $10,000 a month, how much do I need to start investing today for the next every month for the next 20 months at X return, so I have that number?
Well, if you're doing it in 20 months, that's amazing.
20 years, right? Whatever it is. Right? So, and so there's the law of the, 4%. There's compounding calculators online.
Sure.
There's retirement. One of my mentors, Chris Hogan, has a great retirement calculator that says, hey, this is what I want. This is the amount of income I have. This is, X, Y, and Z. Has a lot of parameters in there, and his algorithms and everything spit out a number. You need to invest $2,100 today to hit that number. Or, if you're behind. If you're not, maybe it's $476.
Sure. Well, I saw your post the other day about Apple stock, that if you had bought $399 in Apple stock in 2003 when the iPad came out, it would be $112,000 today. And you know what's amazing about that is two things. One, I think back to 2003 and the amount of money that I was making back then, and it would have been no problem at all with discretionary income to put $4,000 in Apple stock had I known. And Apple was a big company. I mean, it was in, you know, a somewhat known quantity. I mean, a little bit of turmoil back then, but, you know, so I could have had $1.1 million if I just would have left it alone and not looked and not tried to day trade or go, oh, it's up double, I should take the money out and then go spend it on something. You know, it's amazing. And the other factor that was in there, because you put all the details in there, which was great, that it was a 35.35% rate of return. And I think what a lot of people don't realize and may not know is the rule of 72, that you divide an interest rate by 72, and that's the years it takes to double. So 12% takes 6 years to double. So at 35%, you're almost doubling every 2 years. So you wonder how that gets to 112,000 from 399, but it's pretty amazing when you go from 400 to 800 to 16 to 32 to 64 and keep going, it starts to really ramp up in those later years. So.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, one of the things I meant to go earlier was that opportunity cost. Everything has an opportunity cost, you know, and when you can delay gratification and know that I'm not going to spend $2,000 on a new set of golf clubs today, because that $2,000, if I invest it into X, will grow, right? Do you want to buy the thing, right? Do you want to buy, you know, Matt, do you want to spend $2,500 on a Peloton, or do you want to write a $2,500 check and buy Peloton stock?
Yeah. So, and there's probably got to be some balance in that. You don't want to just live your life and not give yourself any rewards. But let's get into the other four things that roll up into the having a plan.
Yeah, sure. So number two is, and this is no secret, this is absolutely everybody in America, but we live beyond our means and we use debt, right? So the mistake is, you know, we don't have a plan, right? With the budget, right? With the dreaded B word. I said it early in the broadcast, so everybody can, you know, sign off now. I got rid of the budget word. So at the end of the day, all a budget is telling your money what to do and where to go, right? And what to buy, right? It gives you permission and freedom to spend money. So as long as you live under that number and you achieve whatever it is that you have to achieve, your required amount, your variable spending, and even saving and investing, when we get to that point, if you do that with your income and you avoid using credit cards, borrowing money on cars, student loans, those types of things that technically over time will increase your lifestyle, right? Will increase your required spending, you're going to live beyond your means, or you're going to live underneath your means, right? In real estate, how that translates to real estate agents is when we get a check, like nothing's been taken out of that check. You know, everyone before real estate, right? Everybody before real estate, if you had a corporate job, when you got the check, that was your check, right? So the business owner had taken out all of his money. The business owner had taken out all of their taxes. Your taxes had taken out, and this is what you and your wife get to spend, you and your spouse. In real estate, the business owner hasn't taken out taxes, right? The business owner hasn't taken out expenses. The business owner hasn't taken taxes out for the employee, which is you. So there are so many different filters that have to be attached to that dollar amount, that top line GCI, before it even gets to your bank account or before it even gets to your personal side.
For sure.
Which is why every time when I start with clients is, how much money does it take to keep your lights on at a minimum? You know, and let's say it's $5,000, right? For whatever, it's just five grand. Well, that $5,000, it has to equal more GCI, right? Because out of your GCI, that $5,000 comes, your taxes come, and obviously your business expenses. So a lot of the times the easy math is just take it times 2. So if you need $5,000 to live, bare bones minimum, times 2 is $10,000 of GCI. So now that at least gives you enough runway to live on 50% of your income, pay the government, and pay expenses to start. And then so you can do the simple math of, hey, I need 8,000, and then 16. Or it's $5,000 bare bones, but I want to invest another 2. Well, now I've got to go, now it's forcing you to go sell more real estate because you want to hit your personal goals. So I think that's where real estate agents, they get a little sideways. The thought is right, however, the math is backwards. I want to go sell this many houses so it can generate this. No, I need this, so I have to go generate that.
It gives you a little more incentive, motivation, and purpose.
Yeah. So many people ask me, like, how do real estate agents sell more when you help them with their finances? And it's called motivation. We identify the pain point real quick. Because at the end of the day, real estate agents don't make as much as they think. We spend more than we care to admit. And because of that, we're behind on taxes and or retirement. And so if you're always chasing the next sale without a plan, you're going to live beyond your means, and you're going to end up, that gap is going to be a credit card.
Gotcha. All right, so number 2 is no debt.
Yep. So we live beyond our means. So we live on a plan, which is we create a plan, we stick to it, which is called a budget, and we avoid debt and pay it off as fast as possible. Paying it off is using a debt snowball. You can use an avalanche method, or you can use interest rate of return. You probably get to the same point, plus or minus a month. However, I come from the school of paying off the lowest balance first, simply because regardless of interest rate, simply because money is 80% behavior, 20% head knowledge.
So, there's going to be different schools of thought from different people.
Sure.
So obviously, it's just a matter of the perspective, right? This is your method. This is a great method. It's worked for you. It's worked for countless other people. So I'd love to hear your opinion on the concept of purposeful OPM, right? Other people's money.
Sure.
We've heard that term before. If it's purposeful, if you are not necessarily guaranteed, but as close as you can get to guaranteed to, let's say, make X amount of money if you had X amount to invest and you didn't have that to invest, but could get it at let's say, a favorable interest rate or anything else like that. Is there ever a good time under your system, under what you preach, to use debt?
This is when I get to put in my mouthpiece and buckle my chin strap. No, in all seriousness, if we all looked at money through the lens of mathematics, you're right. You cannot discount math. However, the one thing that is out of that equation, and it's out of every single equation, is risk.
Oh, okay.
That's it. It's just risk. So if you have a high level of risk tolerance, sure. Just know that you can't put a dollar amount on risk, right? I'm going to get a car loan at 1%, 2%, no percent, whatever, and then go invest my money in the market. Sure. Until you lose your job.
Mm-hmm.
Until your spouse gets sick. Until coronavirus hits and your income goes to zero.
So it's more of a global risk. It's not even the risk of the market returning less, because obviously the argument will be, even if the market went down, if it's over a 5-year period, chances are a 1% amortized loan versus compounding interest, you're likely going to outpace that car loan if you didn't buy it for $30,000 cash and you put that $30,000 to use for you. But it's all the other risk that comes into play of being illiquid at the moment that you need it.
Yeah, and again, you look at, especially with cars, right? Cars are, especially for us in real estate, where the mode of transportation is how we get to and from places, right? Office to listing to buyers, back home, et cetera, et cetera. So we, as real estate agents, destroy vehicles from a value standpoint. And I'm talking to a car guy, so I know this is gonna leave a little bit of a mark, right? But at the end of the day, one of the things that has helped my wife and I pay off the debt and build wealth at the speed that we've been able to do is from a logical standpoint of simply looking at what is transportation, getting from point A to point B, what's the mode of that transportation, and how can we make that as cheap and efficiently as possible? And because it's the thing that goes down in value every single time, regardless of who you are and what you drive, right? It could be a $100,000 car, it could be a $4,000 car. Every time you drive that thing, it goes down. And so when you eliminate that number and your money going towards that, you're going to grow the other side of the equation, which is your net worth and your wealth, right? And so when it comes to interest rates and car payments, or interest rates and lost my train of thought of paying $30,000 for a car cash rather than $600 a month, right? There's that risk. Now you've got a payment every month for 60 months, right? So it's just that negative energy of $600 going out, $600 going out, $600 going out, rather than saying, okay, this is what happens to a car. This is the logical side of it. If I go spend 30 grand, and when I get ready to sell it and it's paid off, it's worth 15. So number one, and I paid 35 for it over the course of time, rather than saying, okay, here's a $10,000 check. I'm going to go buy a $10,000 car or $15,000 car. I'm going to invest what I was going to send the dealership every month. And you do that time on task over time. 30 years later, it's not even close to where you would be.
Yep.
I mean, that delta is going to be in the millions at whatever rate of return you want to apply.
All right. What's a financial mistake?
So next, my financial mistake, number 3 is the path of money, not mastering the path of money. And this really hits home, especially in real estate, when we have that top line GCI. How does it get to all of the places it needs to go, right? So who gets paid first, right? The business owner. Who's the most important employee running it, either if it's a solo brokerage or a solo agent, or it's a massive team, the number one most important person is the owner. So the owner has to get paid first. And one of the things that agents don't do is they don't allocate. Agents, especially solo agents, have multiple responsibilities, right? They're the owner and they're the employee, right? They're doing the work. So they don't pay, so we have to pay the owner and we have to pay the employee for selling the house, right? So the owner needs to get paid 2 or even 3 ways. One out is profit, which always comes out first, which is reverse of what all of us have been taught through school. Number 2 is the person that actually went and sold the thing. So they need their money. The next priority is the government's got to get their money. We can't use, the military can't use used bullets. Like they've got to go out and buy their own bullets. And then the 4th thing is all of the operation expenses. So we have profit, the money that who did the work, which is owner's compensation, especially for solo agents, the taxes, and then the business operation. And so with that as a new filter, a path of money, the more that you sell, now the business owner can get 3 different streams of income: profit, selling the house, and running the business, which you can pay yourself as you go along as a S Corp, and you pay yourself in payroll. Sure. Personally, that's kind of where I am right now, with the couple different businesses that I have. I'm taking profit and I'm getting paid for doing the work. I'm now at that phase where I can get paid for running the business, which comes out of that operation expense category. Mm-hmm. And so now everything has a percentage, everything has everything has a rule, everything has a job, and there's a path. And then you also do that exact same thing on your personal side. Right? The path that I encourage on the personal side is the first thing you have to do is you have to give money. The most fun you'll ever do with money is you have to give some of it. Right? We're instructed in regardless of, biblical beliefs or faith views, we're instructed to give a tenth, a tithe, right? And that could be to a church, it could be to a charity, it could be to your neighbor. But if you give a tenth of your income and force yourself to live on 90%, I guarantee you will live a better life. And then once we give, we have to save. And that saving comes from saving to spend, saving for long-term, and saving for investing. And then the spending is whatever you spend your money on, right? Whatever you want to live, right? Your vacations, your life, your house, your four walls, all of that stuff that, that your mortgages and stuff that you spend money on. One of the things that, as I work with agents on the first 3 months that we're in relationship, is how I don't want to say mix money, because they do mix the money, but they mix expenses, right? Agents that are, everybody has a cell phone, right? However, most people I talk to, their cell phone is out of their personal account.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's just because they don't know, right? It's because their family plans on it, right? And it just comes out of their family budget, or it's paid out of a family debit card or credit card or whatever. And so one of the things is we move a lot of those household expenses that are traditional expenses, but we get to write them off as a Schedule C or a K1 or all of the different accounting forms that we can deduct, right? 1065 if you're a general partnership. And we put those on the business side of the ledger, right? So which now frees up a little bit of personal income, our car insurance, other insurances that's pertinent to you, cell phones, any type of eating out that is anywhere close to tied to, client interaction, right? We move that stuff over to the business ledger, which will help free up, right? So it's not necessarily commingling money, just commingling expenses. And it makes your accounting so much easier 12 months later.
Yeah. So so you had mentioned in the path of money, taxes before expenses, which I agree with wholeheartedly, because a lot of people, what they do is they've expensed themselves too aggressively, living above their means, whether in business or in personal, and then they don't have enough money for their taxes. And that's always a big haunting thing. I think there's a lot of people that felt relief because of the extension to July 15th this year, as a result of the what's going on. But with that, so taxes come first. But with them coming first, you still have to formulate them off of your after expense income, because obviously you've got the write-off. So do you have a rule of thumb as to how much should go to taxes?
Yeah, so I want to pause real quick there, because I want to make sure that I didn't leave anyone astray earlier. The mistake is, paying expenses first, not paying taxes, and the agent making the money last, right? That's the mistake. That's the trend. That's what most people do. How to avoid it is what we talked about earlier, of making sure that we have the path of money. Okay, so I want to make sure that. Yeah. When it comes to the taxes, everyone's in every state. Not everybody can live in Nevada where you guys don't pay taxes and all of that stuff.
We pay taxes, just not state taxes.
Right. Some of us in the real world have to pay both state and federal taxes. So, but ultimately, it's going to be different for everyone. When you do that reverse calculation, I think a lot of people, especially if you're in lab coats, and like, how much should I save for taxes? And you ask, a group of 120,000 real estate agents, what do you save for taxes? I always joke, but I mean, because you see different numbers, right? Is it 20%? Is it 25%? Is it 33%? Is it whatever? The answer is there is no percentage, because it's all based on, at the end of the day, what is your actual income? I mean, if you're selling 2 houses a year, that number is totally different than if you're selling 2 houses a day.
Yeah, if you're selling 2 houses a year, you really don't have to save for taxes because your personal deductions are likely higher.
Exactly. Or, exactly. So I always recommend 15 to 20% of the GCI number is a really good place to start. Because once you take that GCI number and you do the reverse engineering, and you're going to have about 30 or 35% in expenses, by the time you take that off of the number, it's going to net out around 15 to 20%. And so that's always generally a good place to start. But sometimes you might not be able to start there because your expenses are so high, and it's going to take a while to get rid of those expenses to get that number back up.
Sure. So, and I don't want to jump too far ahead because I don't know if 4 or 5 are tax strategies because we didn't go over them first. So I'm in anticipation as much as anything else, but I do want to jump back and talk about a couple of things with taxes because I think there's a lot of people out there that, you know, maybe their income's not quite enough yet, but as it grows, they've really got to think about the difference between sole proprietorship, LLC. And I'm not here to give advice. I'm here to give the advice to talk to your accountant or tax professional to do that. But there's a ton of savings, you know, that could be had.
Yeah, I would say, I shot a video on this. I would say wholeheartedly, the top 2 things that agents spend the most money on are how much they pay their brokerage, which nobody actually ever sees, right? Because it comes in, sure. It's taken out before the check, right? I think that would be a big difference if the whole number came to the agent and then they had to actually write the check to the brokerage. It would be a really different world, right? It's kind of like the employee that has to write a check to the government for their taxes every month. That's going to leave a big mark, right? So 1 is how much agents pay to their brokerage, and 2 is how much they actually pay in taxes. And because most people, they either don't pay taxes or they pay too much. My wife and I were on point for 3 years on our record keeping and paying our taxes. And she's a W-2 and I was a 1099. However, this year we leaned into taxes. And I reached out to people that are better than me and know way more than me. And we got we re-amended 16, 17, and 18. We're getting $24,000 back in overpayments, right? And so, and it's just because we didn't know, and the accountant that we had is a great dude. I play golf with him 3 times a year. He was servicing our taxes, which he was doing his job, right? And I can't be mad at him. However, because I didn't know. So I think we pay a lot of stupid tax when it comes to taxes and how much we actually pay.
It's a great point that you make. You know, just like all real estate agents and everybody else, doctors, lawyers are not created equal. Accountants aren't either. So as much as it sounds a little geeky, you have to find somebody that's really passionate and loves taxes and loves taking apart the tax code and understanding it, as opposed to just your general accountant or your person at H&R Block, right? Because there are a lot of strategies, and you just said, you know, you play golf with your accountant. He's a friend of yours. He's a good person, but it sounds like he treats the business like Groundhog Day. The alarm goes off. He's got to get up. He makes a cup of coffee, goes in, and he fills out numbers on a spreadsheet or in some sort of Intuit software. But then there's other people that really dig deep in there. And I'll give one really quick example of something that really blew my mind in the last year is that, you know, I buy my children, I've got 2 kids. I buy my kids sneakers. I buy them clothing. I pay for things for them throughout the year, right? And they're not cheap. Anybody that has kids, they know they're not inexpensive. They're not assets to the balance sheet, right? But now I could actually pay my children. Now it has to be legitimate. I have to have them do something. I have to have them shred papers or you know, do something for me. But I could pay them up to $1,000 a month. And if I pay them $1,000 a month, $12,000 for the year, it's outside labor. It's not W-2. There's no matching taxes from the employer side. And then if it's under $12,000, it's under their standard deduction. They're not even required to file a tax return. So I get to write off $12,000 of money, but let's take it down to a more normal. Let's say you think with clothing, you know, eating out, with different things that you spend $3,600 a year on stuff directly for your kids. So pay them $300 a month, have them do some stuff for you. And then you've got that $3,600 in an account for them. And guess what? They pay for their clothes. They do all of that. And now you just got pre-tax dollars. That was a $1,000 benefit to you, and not having to pay that stuff with post-tax. So when you've got accountants that can teach you things like that, you win the world. Really do.
Yeah, I tell you, I wrote 2 checks one in November and one in February, one for my coach and two for my CPA that were significantly more money than I have ever written anyone a check for. And the 5-year, 10-year, 20-year return on those, you can't put a dollar amount. I mean, it's going to be 100 to 1,000x 20 years from now. So if anyone out of this, if they don't get anything at all, other than the fact that lean into your taxes, your own personal IQ, and then also go find someone in your database, go find someone on social, reach out to myself. Like, you go lean into and find the right accountant. They can save you thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
Awesome. We have to hit up number 4 and number 5.
Yep.
We've got 18 minutes, so I'd say let's try to get through these in about 8 minutes, so that way we leave 10 minutes or so for a question and answer.
Cool. Well, they're the fun ones. Number 4 is we don't have emergency or sinking funds, right? You talked about those big peaks and valleys. I mentioned the $20,000 month and the $0,000 month, right? That happens. The best of the best have those big swings. Now it might be, the best agent on the planet may not have a 0 month, but they might go from 100 to 40, right? And so having money set aside, like knowing what we know now, who would have loved to have an extra 20 grand 4 months ago?
I'd always like to have an extra 20 grand.
Right, especially when the entire world and economy shuts down and you can't sell a house for X, Y, or Z. $20,000 would have been a big bonus or big safety net for a lot of people 4 months ago, right? And so once we get out of debt and once we get that path of money figured out, we can then start saving money for, and adding age to our money, right? Whether it's, hey, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fund June, July, and August, right? I'm going to get 2 or 3 months ahead. My wife and I have what we call a sweep account. So for whatever reason, if my income, she's a W-2, so her income's here, and we've actually figured out how to live on her income plus $1,000, right? So we figured that out. And so anytime that my income falls short of a certain number, we have, call it 10 grand, that we just sweep $1,500 over. And now we just mode of operation. Next month, I have a $3,000 higher amount. I just take $1,500 and I put it back in that sweep account. Nice. Month 2, month 3, month 4, month 5. Oh, we had a dip. Just bring that over, right? And that's not an emergency fund. That's just a pile of money sitting there, whatever it is, that just helps us stay balanced when something goes, like when we have that little bump in the road. Now, emergency fund, something that's 3 to 6 months, is there for when COVID hits, right? And your income might go to 0 for 2 months, or it might get cut by 60%. Right, so that emergency fund, if you look at, okay, hey, my step number 1 is I got to get a little bit of money set aside. Step number 2 is got to get out of debt. Maybe step 3 or that next real milestone that you want is that 3 to 6 months of savings for emergencies. That will also help alleviate the problem number 2, which is borrowing money. Right, some people borrow money because of lifestyle. Some people borrow money because they have to eat. Right, that emergency fund will help all that stuff to help cover that. Saving for future expenses. I said sinking fund. This isn't talked about a lot in money, but it's one of the things that I highly recommend. That because the mistake is agents just don't have enough runway, right? They don't have enough cash. Cash is oxygen, and the mistake is because we live. We sell a house this month to pay last month's rent, or we sell a house this month to pay last year's taxes. We don't give ourselves a long enough runway for when we trip and fall, or we don't give ourselves a long enough, hey, I want to go on vacation in 12 months, and that vacation is $6,000, so I have to save $500 a month, so I have $6 grand to spend. Right? That's a sinking fund. We sink that money. Like if you have to buy a new roof for a rental property or a commercial building, right? You have to sink that money every single month so that when you know that roof is going to be due, you have the money that you have to go buy that thing.
Gotcha. How about the unexpected? expenses. Like I know when my tires are wearing on my car and I've got to start thinking about that, but I've got a car, it doesn't even have that, it's out of warranty, but it doesn't have that many miles on it. Driving my son to soccer about 3 months ago, and all of a sudden I lose all the power in the car. I pull over, I bring it into the shop. I used to own auto repair shop, so I'm able to look at stuff myself and hopefully fix some of it. This one needed the repair shop. Turned out I broke a timing chain. So unfortunately for me, I like nicer cars. I do own it outright, but it was a $9,000 repair.
Yeah. So when you have stuff like that, unexpected expenses, I mean, there's unexpected, there's stuff that we expect to happen, right? Which is, we expect tires to go bad. We need brakes. We need, we're going to have MLS dues, right? We have that stuff. We have future things that are going to be bought, that are going to need to be bought. And then you have that expense that's an emergency. I mean, if that's your only method or mode of transportation, having a massive expense on a car, if you don't have an emergency fund, right? I think one of the things you have to do when you have an emergency fund is to define what an emergency is, right? A flat tire shouldn't be an emergency, right? Tires are filled with air. We're real estate agents. We drive over nails. Like, that's not an emergency, right? So, but you don't know when your timing belt's going to go, right? And it's a bigger number. So we need a bucket of money for that. One of the things that we have, Melinda and I have, we have 2 little small dogs. I refuse to buy pet insurance. That's just not something we do, right? We don't buy extended warranties, and we don't buy, gimmick insurance. So one thing we do is it's like, okay, what's it going to cost? What's the most amount of money that our dogs are going to cost? $5,000, right? So we have $5,000 sitting there in a savings account labeled our dogs in case they need an emergency. We've got the money, right? And so that's just an example of, but name it whatever it is, right? If you've got kids, you're going to need more money, right? We don't have any kids, so we don't need as much as somebody that has 3 kids. So, I think it's 3 to 6 months is a really good number to have as a safety net, and then build around that for anything else. So you kind of protect the emergency fund.
Great.
Number 5 is probably the biggest one, but it's the thing that we think about last, and that's retirement. Like, the mistake is there's no exit strategy off the transaction treadmill. There's just, I gotta sell a house, I have to sell a house, I have to sell a house, I have to sell a house. Whether it's going to be real estate, whether it's going to be a new business that you're going to invest in, whether it's going to be money coming off the stock market or investments, whatever it is, there's no plan for retirement, right? And that's the mistake. Too many agents today are selling houses because of mistakes they've made for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
It sounds, I don't want to say cruel, but at the end of the day, there are a lot of people that, they're going to sell a house or take a listing appointment on the way to their funeral, right? It's going to happen because they've made all the mistakes, right? They didn't have the person, right? Mm-hmm. So ultimately, we have to get ahead of that. That's where the plan comes in. That's where the budget comes in. That's where no debt comes in. That's where the path of money and the cash on hand is. When we can create all of that, now we can recreate the retirement, and we can start investing, whether it's into mutual funds or IRAs or real estate or whatever, right? Maybe it's a business outside of real estate, right? My wife and I, we went on a walk the other day, Melinda and I, we've been married 10 years this fall. And I asked her, I said, how much longer do you want to work? And she said 10 years. And then after 10 years, she wants to run something that we own, right? That's her vision of how she wants to go into retirement. So one, have that, and then, build around it, right? Find out what that number is that we talked about in the plan, and then come all the way back to, okay, I need $500 a month. However, I don't have $500 a month. So I get out of debt. I live on a plan. I get out of debt. I save money. Put a downward pressure on taxes. I make sure I follow the path of money, and that'll leave you enough to invest in retirement so you can hit your dream and your goals and go out and live in Nevada and Las Vegas with you.
Excellent. I know that's one of your goals, either here or Arizona, right?
Either there or Arizona, man. We're doing this thing in 18 months. We're going to be doing it from your backyard in person.
Awesome. So I've got a question here.
Okay.
And it says, Matt, what's the wealth chart behind you? I'm intrigued.
Yeah. So
on your door behind you.
Yeah. So that's just a way for me to track the conversations that I'm having, and it's labeled a wealth chart. And so the more conversations I have, I fill up those bubbles. And when I fill up the bubbles, I just reset this month. So as I fill up those bubbles, I hit my target. And if I just keep doing that with some patience and with time, I mean, at the end of the day, I win.
Awesome.
So that's a business tracker, a wealth tracker for me, to track conversations and people that come into my world.
Gotcha. All right. So I have a question here, which is essentially, well, let's see, more coming in. So you had said at the beginning that you were 300 pounds, $551,000 in debt, gambling, smoking a pack a day, doing basically every evil vice that's out there, right? But you also said you were in marriage counseling.
Yep.
Right? So how has this affected you and Melinda in regards to knowing that, I don't even know what the percentage is. It's a really high percentage that say that the number one fight and the number one cause for divorce is financial distress. And it's not necessarily financial distress that people are completely broke and destitute or going homeless. It's a lot more of people that do get by and live an okay life from an outside optics perspective, but internally there's still a struggle to maintain that living to their means. So what has this done for you and your marriage?
Well, it has ultimately changed everything. The decision that I made when I was sitting on one side of the couch and Melinda was on the other in tears, and I was 300 pounds and I didn't fit on the couch, to go from that point 8.5 years ago to today, we have both gone through significant life, physical, financial, and mental transformation. We both accepted Jesus as our Lord and Savior through this process. The conversations we have around goals on an annual, biannual, and quarterly basis. How we talk and relate to money. Like, my wife's financial IQ is so much different than where it was, 6 months, 12 months, 5 years ago. She knows how much it takes for us to live every month. She knows, we do a budget every month. We sit down every week and just make sure we're on track. I can count on one hand how many arguments we've had in the last 5 years.
Nice.
And I mean, the peace, that doesn't mean we agree, right? Like, that doesn't mean that there's not some, what's the emotional, I can't think of the word I call it sometimes, like intense fellowship. There's some intense fellowship between Melinda and I sometimes on those budget committee meetings. Mm-hmm. However, at the end of the day, I can't remember the last time we had a knockdown drag out. Now, we disagree on some things, right? But that's just part of, I'm a guy and she's a girl, right? I mean,
Mars and me.
Right. So ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to agree more than we disagree. And we know we have standards and principles set in. We have filters set in our relationship that when we get on track or when we get off course, we have systems and principles that bring us back on track.
Was there at the very beginning, was there a struggle or a buy-in that you had to get in regards to, anything that potentially needed to be sacrificed?
There wasn't a ton. I give her so much credit, like the amount of sacrifice that Melinda has gone through over the last, truly till today. We went all the way to the bone. In 2014, we sold a car, and we were going to be a one-car family for 3 months and save up some money. And to this day, we still have one car. And again, putting a downward pressure on the thing that costs the most amount of money.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's sacrificed, but she knows that she's doing it for the greater good. Because here in a couple of years, she's going to be able to buy a car with whatever car she wants with writing a check. And she has accepted and buys into that delay gratification to where, hey, we want to go get this. Let's set a plan to go get it.
Awesome. Well, we've got a 3-minute countdown here, and we've got 2 more questions. One of them seems like a quicker answer. The other one might be a little more, so we'll probably close up with these 2. One is, hey, Matt, do you have a printout or diagram of the steps? I need to see it visually. Is there anything that you have that you could attach to the Lab Coat Agents file system?
Yep. What I'll do is I'll actually drop my my book. It's actually, I did an ebook called The 5 Financial Mistakes Real Estate Agents Make, and I can put that in the library. And you can download it and get into my world, and we can, happy to walk you through those steps.
Perfect. And then, well, we got one more that came in after this. So I'm a 53-year-old single mom living transaction to transaction, transforming past limited thinking due to growing up in poverty and being poverty consciousness. I have 20 debt, so I think 20,000 in debt. And if I am blessed with good health, will retire in 15 years. But 10 to 12 would be best. What's the top suggestions to speed this process? I think that ebook probably.
Not only the ebook, but tactically is going to be, we've got to get out of the debt as fast as possible, because the debt is killing your income, and your income is needed for opportunities. So
and paying off the debt, are you amongst the kind of the Dave Ramsey effect of pay the smallest credit card down and then take what you were paying towards that one and add it to the next one and keep doing the snowball?
Yeah, the debt snowball is going to be the fastest way. Over the time I had mentioned emotion and knowledge. If you stack up $1,000, $6,000, $6,000, and $10,000 debts, regardless of interest rate, when you knock out that first $1,000 and you get that win, it's like losing those first 5 pounds on the scale. It's everything to knock those out. So yeah, line them up, smallest to largest, and knock them out.
Great. What recommendation would you give to a couple who are both self-employed looking to establish a strong financial future?
Go on a date night. Go on a date night and have a dream night about what it looks like 20 years from now, and work backwards. And what can you go do to create a household number that you have to hit, and then go put an action plan in place so that your activities go create that number. But it starts with that dream night, sitting over coffee, no kids, no phones, no anything, and just go have a dream.
Great. Somebody wrote, investment property, no savings, going to sell it for 100, or I think they're saying get $100,000. What do you suggest? Over 50 years old. So I'm assuming that they have no savings, but they have $100,000 in equity. And so what do you suggest they do with that?
Well, I mean, if depending on what the cash flow is on the investment property, can they live on that, or where does that play into effect? Or if they're going to sell it, and you're going to get a windfall of $100,000, I would run that right down, Dave Ramsey's baby steps, which is, we create a starter emergency fund, we get out of debt, smallest to largest, and then we create that larger emergency fund. And then from there, we are going to invest the rest, or maybe that funds the next 3 months, depending on, again, not knowing what their cash flow system is, or their cash flow standing. So any windfall money is going to run down Dave Ramsey's baby steps, which I highlight in the book, because that's the method that I recommend.
Great. And let's see if there's this last one. I understand real estate more than the stock market, so buy a home inside my IRA and plan to convert my wife's IRA to a Roth IRA down in this year, as our income this year is lower. Okay, so that's just a statement. Will recording be available? Absolutely. So we're going to close up on that. This will be on Lab Coat Agents afterwards, and if you go to the Lab Coat Agents YouTube page, every webinar that Lab Coat Agents does, including this one, are always there and available. So thank you, everybody, for attending and joining us. We had hundreds of people on, so that is awesome. Matt, thank you for your insight and your wisdom. And if anybody wants to get a hold of Matt, he is in the Lab Coat Agents community. He will have his ebook, which will have his information. And is there any last shout out that you want to put out there for anyone?
Yeah, definitely. Let's connect on social, Facebook, Instagram, and actually Instagram's _fit realtor, _fit realtor on Instagram. It's my name on Facebook. I've got the ebook, which is free. I also have a private Facebook group called Budget Hackers. It's called Budget Hacking for Budget Hackers. And just know that you're only one budget away from really anything that you want to achieve financially in your life. So it all starts and ends with a cash flow plan or a budget. But definitely reach out. The ebook will link you to all the steps. It'll link you to me, and it'll also link you to the Facebook group. Excellent.
Well, thank you very much. And we're going to sign off now. We'll see everybody later.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, stay safe.
You bet.